Welcome to our channel. Today we will be presenting you with 10 crazy facts about the Salem witch trials. You'll be shocked to learn what we have in store for you at the end of this video, so make sure to stay until the first place to find out which one's the craziest fact about the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials are one of the most intriguing historical events in American history. Were the witches real, or were they just imagined magic users? Let's find out. Top 10 crazy facts about the Salem witch trials. Without further ado, let's begin with our countdown. 10th place. Politics were crazy at the time. The Salem witch trials, as with many other historical events, didn't just come out of nowhere. There was actually a lot going on in colonial America at the time. Salem was divided into two different things, a town and a farming village. The two sides usually argued about resources, religion, and political power. Eventually, the Salem villages divided into differing factions that each wanted to gain independence from the town. During 1689, a side of the villages obtained the right to found their own church, and while doing so, they chose Reverend Samuel Parris. Parris was a former merchant with very known rigid ways, on top of also being very demanding of compensation, earning the wrath of the villagers, who also wanted to drive him out just 3 years after. How does this all relate to the witch trials? Well, Parris had a 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and Betty had a cousin, Abigail Williams, who also loved to listen to tales told to them by Tituba, a slave brought over from Barbados. Now that we've laid the pieces of the chessboard, you can probably figure out how it translates into what happened next. 9th place. Betty Parris. Just a year after Reverend Parris was ousted, his daughter began having fits that no one was able to properly explain, and so did her friend Abigail and another girl named Ann Putnam. Doctors, who admittedly weren't very much advanced at the time, began examining the girls, who all seemed to have been possessed by something. They contorted, cowered under chains, and shouted nonsense just as in a modern horror film. Explanation? It was actually the local doctor, likely William Griggs, who first diagnosed the girls as having been bewitched when he couldn't find anything medically wrong with them to explain the strange behavior. Oh, the girls were possessed. They began bullying the girls until they spilled how they got enchanted, and the girls claimed that the women around them were witches, labeling poor Tituba, a beggar named Sarah Good, and another elderly woman known as Sarah Osborne as witches. You probably know what happens next. 8th place. There were many tortures. Before the witch trials took place proper, the previously mentioned girls were harshly beaten, especially poor slave Tituba. Tituba claimed that the devil came to her and bid her to serve him, mentioning black gods, red cats, yellow birds, and even a white-haired man who had her sign the devil's book. She claimed that all around them were several undiscovered witches who wanted to destroy the Puritans. Gossip spread like wildfire, and suddenly the whole region was dancing to the tune of Tituba's Song of the Devil. 7th place. The witch trials begin. It didn't take long until there were investigators searching door to door, with the residents pointing their fingers at several supposed witches, filling their ears with weird testimony and hearsay because they were too terrified to say the truth. The accused were tortured and made to stand trial in hasty proceedings before a special court set up for the purpose. This ended up with 19 convicted witches who were hanged at Gallows Hill. On top of that, defendant Giles Corey was tortured to death when he refused to enter a plea at his trial. Others were accidentally murdered too, including an infant. 6th place. Tituba actually survived. Despite Tituba being one of the main causes of the trials, the slave survived the tortures and the trials. Tituba initially denied the claim that she was a witch, but notoriously later decided to confess that it was true and accused 2 other women as well in the process. Tituba ultimately survived the ordeal and was not hanged, which is very ironic considering that the actual residents of Salem were affected by it. So, what do you think of these crazy facts so far? Let us know in the comments. 5th place. Many people objected. Of course, due to the trials being so barbaric, many people objected to the whole procedure, even within the religious Puritan community. An important minister in Boston, named Increase Mather, was one of these objectors, stating that it were better that 10 suspected witches should escape then one innocent person should be condemned. One of these unfortunate victims was a prominent woman in the community known as Martha Corey. The story goes that Martha Corey and her husband sat in on the trials from the beginning, causing Martha to be really suspect about the legitimacy of the proceedings. Giles wanted to attend, but Martha objected him from doing so. A particularly nasty rumor spread that Martha was conspiring on behalf of the witches and was eventually accused of being one herself. Fourth place. What we know might be an exaggeration of the events. Historical events tend to be exaggerated for the sake of drama in modern films and novels, and since the Salem witch trials happened so long ago, there's a huge amount of blurry information. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, played a large role in popularizing many of the details of the Salem witch trials and dramatizing facts that he uncovered in historical records. While Miller maintained that he kept everything historically accurate, some have noticed that he made changes to the real record for the sake of the play. An extra fun fact, The Crucible is named as such because a crucible is a type of container employed for heating substances at very high temperatures. They tend to be used to describe high-pressure situations, such as the one the witch trials creates for the accused. Third place, the tests. The tests to determine who was a witch was actually pretty interesting. First, they performed a touch test in which the person afflicted with fits would become calm when touching the witch who cast the spell on them. Then, they had a confession by dunking. They would dunk an accused witch in water until they finally confessed. Next, they forced them to recite the Lord's Prayer. If a person could not recite the Lord's Prayer without error, they were considered a witch. There was also spectral evidence, which was probably the flimsiest test of all. The accused would claim to have seen the witch in their dreams working with the devil. The next test is submersion, a torture method in which the accused was bound and dropped in the water. If they floated, they were considered a witch. Of course, if they didn't float, they would drown. The final test was pressing. In this test, heavy stones would be placed on the accused. This was supposed to force the confession out of the witch. Unfortunately, the person being pressed couldn't breathe to give a confession, even if they wanted to. Second place. The trials used flimsy evidence. One of the main criticisms of the trials is how they all employed gossip, hearsay, and false testimonies to prove that someone was a witch. Truly, there was no way to know if someone was a witch simply by listening to a few people claiming they were. One famous instance of the trials that relates this was the case of John Proctor. His wife, Elizabeth, had been accused of witchcraft, and John tried to step in to defend her. This resulted in him being accused as well, and in the end, it was he who was executed while Elizabeth was instead sentenced to prison so that her unborn baby would not have to die. First place. They were condemned in 1692. It wasn't until October 3rd, 1692 that Reverend Increase Mather, the president of Harvard College and the father of preacher Cotton Mather, finally condemned the witch trials as they used flimsy evidence and relied on supernatural claims that absolutely no one could prove. Governor William Phips grew disgusted when his own wife was eventually mentioned by the afflicted girls. Determined to quell the madness, he suspended the special court and replaced it with a new Superior Court of Judicature, which disallowed so-called spectral evidence. That court condemned only 3 of 56 defendants. Phips pardoned them, along with 5 others awaiting execution. Later, in May 1693, Phips pardoned those who were still in prison on witchcraft charges. Even the accusers offered public apologies. So what do you think of these crazy facts about the Salem witch trials? Are you shocked to learn about them? Let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to leave us a like, share this video with your friends, and also subscribe to our channel for more great content like today. We hope you enjoyed our video, and we'll see you next time.